Hi, everybody. If you want to find a seat, we're going to get started. Good evening and welcome to the Jewish Museum. My name is Jenna Weiss. I'm the Assistant Director of Public Programs here. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to You're Laughing at That, a deeper look at Jewish humor, featuring authors Judy Gold and Jere Dauber in conversation with Stephanie Butnick. This is the final Unpacking the Book Jewish Writers in Conversation program of the season, so thank you for coming out on this beautiful spring day. You can watch footage of our past programs on the Jewish Book Council's YouTube page and come back when we do this again next year. This event is co-presented with Jewish Book Council and Tablet Magazine, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank collaborators at both organizations for their work on tonight's event. For those of you who might be new to the Jewish Museum, we hope that you come back and join us for one of several events that we have coming up both virtually and on site this season, including lectures, virtual courses, and live performances, inspired by the current exhibition, The Sassoons, which is on view in our second floor galleries, and if you didn't have a chance to visit tonight, please come back and do so. For full details about everything, visit our website to sign up for our e-news. Now I would like to welcome Mary Pomerantz Dauber, Associate Director of Jewish Book Council, who will tell you a little bit more about tonight's program.
Hello, I'm Mary Pomerantz Dauber. I'm the Associate Director of Jewish Book Council. Hi. And I'm so excited to welcome you to the last event of our 9th season of Unpacking the Book, Jewish Writers in Conversation, co-presented with the Jewish Museum. The Unpacking series is one of the highlights of our year, a chance to... Is that better? Yeah. Great. The Unpacking series is one of the highlights of our year, a chance to bring together individuals who have written important works about Jewish life, identity, and history for meaningful discussions about Jewish community. For those of you unfamiliar with the Jewish Book Council, our mission is to enrich and educate the community through Jewish literature. From public programs such as this one, awards and conferences, to essays by Jewish authors, book club resources, interviews, and reading lists, JBC provides tools for engaging and accessible conversations about Jewish life and identity. You can find out more at jewishbookcouncil.org. Tonight's program promises to be a fascinating discussion between our authors, Judy Gold and Jere Dauber, yes, Dauber, and our moderator, Stephanie Butnick, on the lines between good taste and bad, funny or not, if there are lines that can and should be crossed in comedy, what makes us laugh, what doesn't, and how that has changed throughout the years. When Evie Sapphire Bernstein, JBC's program director, first mentioned to me this program was in the works, my first thought was, that means I need a babysitter. And my second was, great, because who doesn't love a night of hearing from funny people about things that make us laugh? So before we begin tonight's program, I'd like to first ask that you silence or shut down your cell phones. I'd also be remiss if I didn't properly thank all of the wonderful people and organizations that have made this evening possible. The Jewish Museum for their support and partnership all of these years, specifically Jenna Weiss, and our media sponsor, Tablet Magazine, the premier publication for Jewish news and ideas in the US. A special thank you to Jewish Book Council's Board of Directors for all their support and for board members who are here with us tonight. And of course, I'd like to thank JBC staff for all their hard work to help make tonight possible. Most particularly Evie, who, working with Jenna, planned everything from coordinating with the authors and even laying out the note cards on your seats for tonight's event. Following this evening's program, we welcome you to join us for a book sale and signing. We hope that you will be as inspired as we have by the authors on tonight's panel, and be sure to grab copies of both their books this evening, along with JBC's own literary journal, Paper Brigade, also for sale. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator. Stephanie Butnick is the deputy editor of Tablet Magazine and the host of the Unorthodox podcast. She is the author, along with her co-hosts, of the newest Jewish encyclopedia, From Abraham to Zabars and Everything in Between. And with that, I thank you so much for joining us, and please enjoy the evening.
Shalom.
Hello. Are we on? You can hear me? Just yell. You will.
You know Jews don't like to yell.
If you can hear me, I have no doubt you will let me know. Thank you all for being here on like a beautiful night, and I just appreciate anyone being indoors and committing to this RSVP that you made, so thank you all. And thank you to Jenna and the Jewish Museum, Evie and Miri and the Jewish Book Council. It's great to be back in person for Unpacking the Book, one of my favorite events each year, and to be here for such a fun final event of the season. So I'll let you guys talk at some point. The title of tonight's event is You're Laughing at That? You're Laughing at That? We could say it however we want. A deeper look at Jewish humor with Judy Gold and Jeremy Dauber. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Let me introduce my guests. Jeremy Dauber, professor of Jewish literature at Columbia University and a prolific author, most recently of Jewish Comedy, A Serious History, and the book we're going to be talking about tonight, Mel Brooks' Disobedient Jew. Oh, sorry. It's on, don't worry, my phone's on silent, but I will drop it on the floor, and it won't be very silent. And Judy Gold, Emmy award-winning comedian, actor, writer, producer, and podcast host. If you're not listening to her podcast, Kill Me Now, you are missing out, and you should subscribe, download it tonight. Her book, Yes, I Can Say That, When They Come for the Comedians, We Are All in Trouble, was turned into a one-woman show this spring. Thank you both for being here with us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
It's a pleasure, yeah.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for buying their books over there and getting them signed over there right after the event. So you each walk over there, and then you walk over here, and then you can go home. So Jeremy, your book begins with the sign-off that Mel Brooks used to end his letters with, which was, "Your obedient Jew, Mel Brooks." And you write, in that signature lies the essential contradiction of his nature, the deep-seated need to be loved, accepted, adopted by all, and the irresistible, rebellious urge to take the universal, the standard formula, and to make it funny by making it Jewish. So I think that's like the perfect place for us to start. Will you tell us a little bit about that idea of taking the universal and making it Jewish?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Judy. It's such a pleasure to be on this with both of you guys. I mean, it's just really a wonderful opportunity for me and a real privilege. I think that one of the things that I'm sure we're going to talk about tonight is this idea, which I think Brooks encapsulated in certain ways, of being a kind of loyal opposition. Someone who really said, what it means to be American, is some of the things that makes being a Jewish American so special, to be able to stand and say, I'm a little bit outside, I'm a little bit pushed against, and part of my job is to show how much I love this by pushing back. And that was something that this paradox thing of your obedient Jew, also, he didn't mean he was obedient. That's not what Mel Brooks is not an obedient guy, right? But he was loyal in a certain way. And America was great to him, and he wanted to be great to America by shattering all of these kind of things, by pushing back. And it's something that Judy talks about, and does so well in her book, which you should buy.
Oh, Jeremy, thank you.
And is that something that resonates with you, Judy, as a comic?
Absolutely. I mean, with all the anti-Semitism that is rearing its ugly head yet again and again and again, Jews have always used humor to disarm people. It was used in the Holocaust. It's a weapon, but it's also a salve. So I feel like, Mel, overtly using your Jewishness to me is, and I think comedy is very Jewish. I mean, if you think about a joke, it's a surprise. The punchline is a surprise. You're looking at something from a completely marrying two things that don't belong together. And that's what we do in our religion. What is a bar or a bat mitzvah? It's taking a passage that they've been arguing about for thousands of years and saying, here, let's get your spin on this. And I think that kind of thinking sort of feeds, comedy in general.
I think that makes a lot of sense to me. I think that's absolutely right. And Brooks his chosen métier in many ways, this parody, is exactly what you're saying, right? Where you say, everybody has seen 20,000 Westerns.
Right.
Right. We all know this, and yet I'm going to look at it from this askewed angle, and I'm going to say, well, why hasn't everybody eats beans, and why hasn't anyone ever shown flatulence?
Right.
And boom,
Yeah.
you've got.
And it's so
miracle.
funny because I try to show my kids that, and they're like, it's not that funny. I'm like, it is so funny. What are you talking about?
But they, this is what I do want to get to this idea with that now, like Mel Brooks remade comedy. We are so used to, we live in the world he and so many others created, and Judy, that you today, continue to just further and expand. And so it's like, you see the farting scene, you're like, of course this is happening.
Right.
But that no one really understands that was the first time that ever happened. It set up this world that we now live in.
Well, one of my favorite anecdotes that I heard from sort of late in life of Brooks, and I'm sure you've heard this too, was when they were trying out the musical of The Producers. And I'm not sure if I can say this
Say it.
I can say it? Okay. So, they were questioning one of the lines in the show, which is, who do you have to fuck to get ahead in this town, right? And Mel Brooks was like, I don't know if we can say that. And Nathan Lane said to him, are you kidding? Have we met? You're Mel Brooks. But it's he created the world, and the world keeps moving along. And,
the first ever recorded joke is a fart joke.
I did not know that.
Yes.
What is the first?
I don't know, but when I was researching for my book, that is
amazing.
the first ever recorded joke.
Well, I'm glad we've already mentioned anti-Semitism and farts. That
Yes.
combination, I think, is new, partially new to the Jewish Museum, but I'm glad we're continuing it. But speaking of going way back to the beginning, Judy, in your book, you point out that laughter is the best medicine. That phrase is derived from the book of Proverbs. Is that true? I had no idea.
What, am I going to lie in my book?
I was like, maybe it's a joke.
What?
Okay, tell us. Where does that come from?
I did the research a few years ago. That's where it comes from. This is a bad question.
I just mean it's like it's in our DNA. This idea,
Well,
laughter is the
of
best
course,
medicine.
I
We
think
invented that.
The whole idea of comedy is being othered. We're othered. We're showing them another world. We're letting them see the world through our eyes. I mean, you could say it. For example, okay, we're Jews, and we speak a certain way, we think a certain way, we act a certain way. If you saw a disabled comedian, someone with a disability on stage doing their act, right? And they did you thought they were really funny. The next time you encounter a person with that disability, you're going to feel more comfortable around that person because you saw that comedian. So I think that laughter, yes, is the best medicine, but the greatest part of good comedies is that, and the extra part is that it can make you think without letting you know. It can change people's beliefs. And it's that, so yes, it is a salve because laughter is really good for you. There's many, many studies about how good it is for you. It is the highest adaptive defense mechanism in the DSM, that book of all that my therapist has on her. Yeah. Not that I've seen her in person in 3 years, but you know what I mean. But it really is. And there's a book called It Helped Us Survive, which is all about humor in the Holocaust, and that they laughed. They said it was, I read a quote in my show that it was the only thing that helped them to remain or to feel like they were still human.
Yeah, I think that, it is one of these things where, there's a Yiddish phrase which translates roughly as to laugh with scorpions. And it's this very powerful thing, which is both, as Judy's saying, sort of the utter therapeutic and coping nature of comedy. And also at times, and this is one of these very powerful things with your work, with Brooke, of the insufficiency of that laughter too. Right. They're one of the great, and Judy's 100% right about this. One of the great places in Auschwitz for jokes, this is true, were the latrines. It was one of the only places where you could go to laugh.
Right.
And it helped, but they were still in Auschwitz. And so it's that tension also that makes the scorpions come with the laughter too. And I think that that's some of the
Right. I mean, a punchline is a release of the tension.
Yeah.
You know, that's exactly what it is. It's a build up and then, and this big release.
Right.
Yeah.
And Mel Brooks once famously said, you know, if they're laughing, how can they bludgeon you to death?
Right.
Right. And, you know, there's a lot to unpack in that kind of combination.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I also just want to remind everyone, there are little note cards on your chairs, and you could write your own questions for Judy and Jeremy, and then JBC staff will come around and pick them up. So we'll get to your questions as well. You know, I think there's a really good quote that actually appears in both of your books. It's a
Really?
Yes, it's a Mel Brooks quote. If you stand on a soapbox and trade rhetoric with a dictator, you never win. But, right, what's the second half of that? If you like, you're never going to win by playing them at their own game. We have our own game to sort of play against them.
Well, I feel like, Mark Twain said, under the assault of laughter, nothing can stand.
Yeah.
So, I think there's two parts to that, don't you?
Yeah. Well, we were talking about this right
Yeah.
outside.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
is that one of the things that we were just talking about this in the back that that Hitler did very quickly was establish these things called joke courts, which were to really criminalize and penalize and punish and throw into concentration camps these people who would make fun of him because ridicule matters,
Right.
laughter matters.
Yeah, so he passed the Treachery Act in 1934, which made telling or listening to an anti-Nazi joke an act of treason punishable by imprisonment or death. And it was because, and this is why when they come for the comedians, we're all in trouble, is the second part of my title, because it was the comedians. They were the ones who were the first to engage the public and talk about what was really happening. And their jokes weakened the Nazi propaganda. And, he knew he couldn't compete with that. But he passed that in 1934. But a year before, in 1933, is when they started banning books. So this kind of stuff scares, am I allowed to say
Yes,
shit?
say it.
Scares the shit out of me. What's going on in Florida? Yeah. And these librarians, I was at a comedy festival in Austin, the Moon Tower Comedy Festival, and I literally bumped into this woman and asked her a question, and it turns out she was there for a library convention. And she was telling me that it's so awful now. These librarians get their books sent back with bullet holes in them.
Oh my God, that's terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, so I know we're talking about comedy, but I think it's all the same.
There is, I mean, and this is an aspect you talk about in the book, of danger.
Right.
To the comedy. When you go out on stage and you tell, a new routine or something like that, there's some aspect.
It's right. It's danger. Comedy is dangerous. Great comedy is really dangerous. But then you have the line. And here's the thing about, we're talking Mel Brooks, who has created all of these amazing theatrical and film and just so much stuff. But when you're just a stand-up, when you're up there, it's you and the microphone, and the audience is such a vital part of our creative process. So I don't know where the line is until I've crossed it. That happens most of the time. You think of a joke, you think it's hilarious, you get on stage, and they're like, nope. And then we get vilified, I can't believe you said, I'm just trying out the joke. Like, it doesn't happen in any other art form. Right. Like, Leonard Bernstein never turned to the insurance adjuster in the third row and was like, what do you think, Dave? Too much oboe? It doesn't happen. But it happens in comedy. And like, you don't know what's funny until you're there. So it is dangerous. It's really dangerous.
And it's a real, it was interesting to see what happened, as you're saying, with Brooks, where he starts on your show of shows, which is this kind of live, it's not stand-up, but it's this live thing every Saturday night. And then, there's a way in which he goes to this more protected sort of sphere of television or movies, where, as you say, you're not having an audience sort of respond to that.
Right. But you are having these powers that be, censors. I mean, you think about the Smothers Brothers, they were fired. It's just, it's a scary time. It's a really scary time now. But do you think, his stuff would be vilified on the internet?
Well, I think yes.
It's social media, whatever it's called. I hate it.
One of the things that was the most interesting to me, is sort of the life and afterlife of Blazing Saddles, right? Where you have, and doing research for the book, I dug up things from sort of the NAACP or people like that saying this is what we would now call an anti-racist movie, right? Right. I think it's the Chicago Defender, which is a black paper, and it says, "Come see the movie and bring a bigot," and Barack Obama, when he met Brooks, says, "Thank you for having this movie," right? And now, late in life, Brooks did this interview and he said, I don't know whether I would do it the same way now, and it's this interesting gap of sort of how this works.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about now, because it does seem like you, Judy, are out there on the front lines in many ways. You were the one out there on stage, in many cases, the only Jew in the place you're visiting, right? And you're very open about being Jewish. So how does Judaism function in your crusade almost to sort of be out there and to say things that are funny and push the line, and this idea of, are Jews sort of the ones who can do it, who can save us again in this world of comedy, in this sort of strange fractured moment we're in?
I don't know how to answer that part of the question, but I do have to say, okay, part one of my answer is, I had a show called 25 Questions for a Jewish Mother, which ran for a long time off Broadway, and it was I interviewed Jewish mothers all over the country, and I had just become a mother, and it was initially we had started the show. The whole goal was to find out if the stereotype was real, and then it became a whole other journey. And the show was amazing because non-Jew, and I would do it in places, and people are like, Baptists, Southern Baptists, like, oh, my mother's just like your. I'm like, no, your mother's not like mine. But, it's a mother, And when I started doing stand-up, I remember I did The Tonight Show, and I think it was 94. I don't remember. Yeah, I think it was 94. And I was doing my mother. I always talked about my mother and being Jewish. And this woman from the Jewish Daily Forward was like, you're promoting a stereotype. And I'm like, I'm just doing my mother. That's exactly what she said and exactly the way she said it. She's literally writing my material. I don't have to do anything, And I got really annoyed because I was like, oh, so you're sitting on the Upper West Side in Little Israel and criticizing me, who's traveling all over the country. I was in Alabama. I'm talking about my Jewish mother, And so that kind of annoyed me. And all through my career, it has always been the one criticism from representatives like agents and you're too Jewish, you're too Jewish. And I was, and no, that's who I am. I'm proud of who I am. And now, of course, everything Jewish is back again, which is so fucking annoying. But, I feel like now, as someone who was always very Jewy and always talking about Jewish things and shoving it down people's throats and never leaving a place without them knowing that they laughed and liked a Jewish person. I now see comedians when they get on stage, when they say, I'm a Jew, I'm Jewish, I'm so thankful because so many of them don't say it anymore. And that's what upsets me. That I am, it used to be when I came out, and everyone was all shocked that I was gay, I was a lesbian. Anyway, that's my mother's like, what, you have to talk about it all the time, Judith? And why can't you be like Ellen? She never talks about it. I'm like, all right, I'll put on men's clothes and cut my hair and dance for you. How's that? But, I remember when you could not say it, it was dangerous to say you were gay. Now that's nothing. But admitting you're Jewish is hard for some comics now, and that to me, we've gone into this place I never imagined could ever happen here in the United States.
Without giving names necessarily, but do you have conversations with other comedians about? Do they say sort of things about why they're, or that are they physically afraid, or are they just uncomfortable? Is it a career thing for them?
I think it's more that they don't want to turn the audience off. You know, for me, I'm like, you know, I don't care because I'm like, you're an anti-Semite. You know, I'll call them out, but my comedy is so there's some like Seinfeld. You know, you think about Seinfeld. They never said they were Jewish on that show.
Right.
And they're the most Jewy characters ever on television. But he avoided it. He never said, Jerry never says, you know, I'm Jewish, blah, blah, blah. Never, ever. But you know he's Jewish. There's so many overt things about Jews, the way, and you know, we really kind of started this whole, I mean, I think comedy especially stand-up, is a direct descendant of our First Amendment. I mean, it's in America, you know, it's part of why we can say whatever we want. And that's why I think, you know, Mel, you know, his stuff is amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible. He really goes to the edge of what's acceptable.
Right. And he was one of those voices with the 2,000-year-old man who
Right.
really said, you know, this is a Jewish voice. I'm
Right.
going to kind of put this out there. And it was at a point like where even a couple of years before that, there were a lot of people who were saying, we're afraid of anti-Semitism. I mean, Carl Reiner says this about the 2,000-year-old man. We're only doing it at private parties.
Right.
Because, not just because it's too Jewish, but because we're afraid that people will take this as sort of anti-Semitic. But they finally decide we're going to put it out there in public, and, you know, it was really accepted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that would happen now?
I think, I mean, and I'd be really interested to hear what you have to say about this, but with all of these different, one of the things I keep thinking about is with all these different niche ways of narrow casting, you know, you can do things that you never could have done. I mean, part of with the Seinfeld anonymity, which I totally agree with you about,
Yeah.
is because, you know, the NBC said we're afraid this is too Jewish.
Right.
It has to be for everybody. But, you know, a show
But
on...
why? That's what I don't understand. Why is something Jewish not for everybody?
I agree. No, I agree with you. But in
You know?
1989, you know, that's how
Right.
they felt. And now you could say, well, we're going to make this for, you know, Amazon, or we're going to do this on a podcast, or we're going to do something. And it's okay because it really going to... But have you found, I mean, are people saying, well, for podcasting or for this, it's okay, but for a bigger thing, you would have to change?
I've had comics say, do you think I'll get in trouble for this? Or
Oh,
do you
really?
think
Okay.
they'll turn on me for this?
Wow. Okay.
And who is they? Is it the other Jews?
Oh, yeah, it's Jewish comedians, yeah.
But I mean, are they worried that other Jews will turn on them for saying something that's perceived as anti-Jewish?
I think it's more the audience turning on them, or taking something the wrong way.
I wanted to get back
Or
to...
not, because when you take the intent out, you know, that's what's gone now. Everyone hears something or sees something, and it's about what they thought, not what the writer thought or the performer thought or the comedian thought. It's not what they're, you know, I'm saying a joke, and you're like, I don't like that joke, and I'm like, well, I didn't intend it that way. You're taking it that way because of your experience or whatever. You're triggered by whatever. But when you take that intent out, you have nothing, because then it just becomes about, oh, that's it. I'm never gonna. It's so frustrating. Intent, nuance, and context, and social media takes all of those out of it.
Yeah. And sometimes I think it's performative too, where people say, "Oh, I can get likes or retweets or something
Right.
like that." I'm not really offended, but I'm gonna
Right.
put
This
it there.
way, I can get more attention.
I can get more attention for
Yeah.
myself with
Right.
who's an egg, you know, on the avatar or
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like that. Right?
yeah.
I want to ask you though, to reverse some of this in a certain way. Do you find, like, because you've been, sorry if I'm taking your interviewing.
No, it's great. It's making
Yeah.
my job really easy.
But when you know, because you've appealed to a wide range of region. Do you find that sometimes people like you in ways that are not the intent that you have? That they say, oh, you know, that was great, and it's great that but you're like, I don't recognize my act in what you like about it?
Oh, that's funny. I don't know. I don't know. That's such a good question.
I think about it because of, you know, it was interesting to me when I was writing the Jewish comedy book. Jack Benny, who, as you all know, a hugely famous, successful person, you know, nationally, he once did a radio contest where he asked people to write in, you may have heard about this, of why I hate Jack Benny, which is exactly the kind of thing Jack Benny would do, right? And he was very worried that he would get anti-Semitic responses, and so he asked the writers to go through it. And it turns out that out of the 108,000 responses, there were 3 anti-Semitic responses. And this was not because people weren't anti-Semitic in 1942, right? I mean, that was not the reason.
Yeah.
The reason was because most people who had not met Jews, right, didn't recognize Jack Benny's routine as Jewish.
Right.
Clearly, that's not the case with you.
They took it, right. They took it. No, but I do think people like me, non-Jews like me for other reasons.
Right. So,
but I'm so Jewish in my everything. They like a Jew. You know what I mean?
Right.
So your social media handle is Judy Gold, JEWDY.
Right.
So you're not hiding it.
Right. People get offended by that.
Non-Jews and Jews?
No,
or
mostly Jews.
Mostly Jews, yeah.
JEWDY.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hilarious. It's amazing.
Right, look, I turned 60, and my partner, my son, had this big roast for me at the Comedy Cellar, and all these every joke was, Judy is so Jewish, One John Fish, very funny comedian, said Judy's so Jewish she has a deviated vagina. And it was just that, and it was just so loving. I loved it that they embraced this thing that I am relentless about. I don't know why I'm so outspoken, but people thank me now.
Well, let's talk about the Jew Bell on your podcast.
Yeah, I have a Jew Bell.
Can you tell everyone what it is and why you do
So
it?
on my podcast, anytime someone mentions anything Jewish or related to, I ring a bell. And it could be, they're talking about someone or they say bagel. It could be anything, heart transplant, whatever. I ring a bell, and I do it because I grew up where, I don't know if either of you grew up. My mother, it was like we'd watch TV, and this was the whole TV. Jew, convert, grandfather was Jewish, anti-Semite. This is how we watch TV. And it is the way my brain works. There's a crime, I'm like, last name. I mean, it's awful. And I started ringing a Jew bell because that's what happens in my head. And I also wanted people to know how much we have contributed to their lives and to make this world a better place. There's not a lot of us, but we do great things for everyone. And it's funny because I'll forget to ring the bell, and my guests will be like, oh, there's one. And they start thinking, oh, wow. And I don't know, it's just an homage to my mother, I think, but yeah.
But to me, in many ways, that is sort of like the Mel Brooks legacy, right? What he did was he said, all of this is Jewish. I'm doing this. I'm an outsider. I'm pushing back. I'm punching up. I'm doing all this stuff. And almost we sort of take it for granted today. That's comedy today, right?
I think so. And I think that in many ways, there was the book came out literally just by coincidence the night before the History of the World Part 2 came out. And I don't know how many.
That is such a coincidence.
It really
was it really?
It really did.
That's amazing.
And
did that help? Was it a bump?
We'll find out.
Right, yeah.
No, but I think that one of the things that was really lovely about it was seeing just this wide umbrella of comedians, some of whom were Jewish, some of whom were not Jewish, all different kinds of stories, that really had come out, as you were saying before, Stephanie, from the world that Mel Brooks has
Right.
made. And that was it really was in its own way a different kind of history of the world that was both deeply suffused with Jewishness, but also sort of went out to sort of what a wide version of what America could be. And I just thought that part was lovely. The comedy, like a lot of Mel Brooks stuff, there's a lot of gags. Some of them are home runs, some of them are singles, but that's fine too. It was a great watch for that respect.
But it's sort of funny because History of the World Part 2 sort of got dissected on Twitter in a way that the old Mel Brooks stuff never would.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, you have now, and I'm interested to hear whether you can. I mean, I did as a kind of brand thing for I live tweeted it, right? I mean, when Blazing Saddles comes in, you're not taking your, shoe phone from Get Smart into the thing and
Right.
sort of tweeting on it, right? It's a very different world now.
Such a different world.
Do you have people sort of live tweeting your stuff like while you're doing it, or?
Well, a lot of the comedy some comedy clubs don't allow phones in.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
I scream at them.
Oh,
I
okay.
start yelling from. It's such an invasion.
Yeah.
Especially if you're working out new material.
Right.
And they're just no.
Yeah.
It's really. Yeah, there's no privacy anymore. And the other thing is, every moron's opinion is equally valid. So they write something. They're all critics. They sit in there. It's awful. Like, you can ruin a restaurant. Because the host or hostess, looked at you cross-eyed, so you can write a terrible review. Too many people have power on social media.
Yeah.
But you can't sell without it,
Right. I would also think that this gets back to the intent thing that you were talking about before. If you're doing a whole act, there's an arc to it.
Right.
And if they sort of tweet 3 minutes in.
Right. It's all out of context.
It's all out of context, and then it gets picked up. I would think, right.
Right, and it's like, no, I'm trying to say this. You didn't hear the beginning, or you didn't hear the end.
Right.
So that's not the entire thing. Yeah, it's awful. It's awful. And murderers, their sentence is determined by their intent, so they get more of a consideration than comedians. So that's good.
Speaking of everyone being a critic, you all, as I said, have the opportunity to ask your questions. So write them down on those little pieces of paper. People will be coming around to collect them, and then we will switch over to your questions. I guess I was thinking, in this idea that Jews made comedy and gave it to the world, is it like the bagel now, where it's like you can get the blueberry bagel with the strawberry cream cheese? Are there sort of
who
just
the
things you
hell
see?
thought of a blueberry bagel? That is an abomination. And
I agree.
strawberry cream cheese, it's
like a hate
awful.
crime.
Yeah.
But is there a version of that in comedy, basically? This thing we gave to the world that they just ruined?
I don't know if they ruined it, but they don't. I feel like they don't give us the credit. They ran with it. I don't.
Yeah, no, I mean, one thing I agree. I mean, one thing that's a positive inflection of that, but is, that the way that when I was writing this history of Jewish comedy was how many different kinds of people were influenced by Lenny Bruce.
Right.
Right, and who said, it's not that I'm a Jew, Lenny Bruce, so open about being Jewish, and so, right, and they're saying, I'm not a Jew, right, but I learned from him that I could tell my own story, and that it has validity, and it has weight, and I can make it funny in that way. And I think he gets that credit, but it's something that people took and ran with in all sorts of different ways.
Joan Rivers,
yeah.
The night she saw Lenny, I talk about this in my show, but she had an epiphany. Someone brought her. She was at Barnard, and someone took her downtown to see Lenny, and she said he was saying the truth on stage.
Oh, wow.
Total truth, but making it funny, and that was what she did, and he had such a profound effect on her. And she also said that when she was a little girl, there were no female stand-ups she could point to and say, I want to do that.
Did you grow up watching Joan?
Joan, Philip, Toady Fields. I love Toady Fields so much. There were so many. And then as I got older, Jean Carroll, these people, it was so interesting to watch them because they were so Jewish and they were so self-deprecating. The first few minutes of their act would be like, I know I should be ironing my husband's handkerchiefs and I'm horrible and I should be, and they'd get that out of the way before they had to sort of do a disclaimer before they could really get into their material, which men never had to do.
Right. No, and River, just the longevity of Rivers as a
5
genius,
decades, right.
Just incredible.
And always relevant.
Yes.
And you knew exactly where women stood in society
By watching
by
Joan.
what she was talking about.
Yeah.
Because she talked about it first,
Do you feel like, that's been the case with you as well in terms of, you've had a long career now.
Yeah,
and
it's long, not as nearly as successful. But I feel like, my act has changed, of course, but Absolutely. She was she was just the nicest.
Oh, wow.
She was so kind and classy, and she never apologized for a joke. And anytime you wanted to, I remember I've worked with her, and she was so good to the women comedians, but I'd always say to her, Joan, you don't know what you did. Oh, forget it. No, it's fine. I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. She was so humble. But she really, when she died, Chris Rock said she should be she is the Mount Rushmore of comedy. Chris Rock, who came from a completely different background than Joan Rivers, but she was beloved by all comedians.
Right. And I think he probably recognized that thing in her, that fearlessness and that sort of personal truth and that kind of thing that he took in his own direction, like you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I think we have cards.
I see some cards. Okay, these have been pre-screened. I'm going to read them, decide which ones I like. Oh, this is a juicy one. How do you feel about one non-Jews playing Jews? Catherine Hahn is Joan Rivers. I didn't know that was happening.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And someone's suggesting that you should get that gig. And then also...
I'm 6'2". No. Well, I've shrunk. I'm
also,
6'2".
the new Oscars rule on Best Pick needs to have multi-ethnic, et cetera, representation. Judy, go.
The second one is so annoying. No, thank you. That they have to follow all these diversity rules. No, it's art. Stop it. I can't stand that. On the Jews, thank you. That really pisses me off. But on the non-Jews playing Jews, that also pisses me off. It didn't piss me off, but then I was like, you know what? Mrs. Maisel is not, you couldn't find a Jew to do that. I just don't, and that is so, again, that's the complete opposite of that diversity thing where you have to, all right, here's all I have to say. I'll make it personal about me. I used to always play, because I'm so tall, I've gotten so many parts as a woman disguised as a man, right? I did a movie with Glenn Close, and it took place during the gold rush, and I was a woman disguised as a man. I've 100 times. It's like, oh, she's tall, she can play the woman disguised. Now that goes to a trans person, I will never be cast like that. But, the more I think about these Jewish characters, yes, they're actors. I don't believe a non-Jew can't play a Jew, but come on. Was it Fiddler on the Roof was directed by a non-Jew.
Named Jewison, weirdly enough.
What? Was it named Jewison?
Norman Jewison. But
no.
Not Jewish.
No.
Yeah.
I don't know. There are certain things. I'm just getting more, it's the anti-Semitism that makes me change my mind. But this whole diversity thing is pissing me the F off.
Yeah, no, I think it's hard because we have these two sort of very important competing values that are balancing against each other. One is, as I think Judy's saying, sort of the empathy that comedy or literature, which I teach, or things like that, and writing generates of saying, you can understand someone deeply by hearing and listening to their art, by teaching it, in my case, by talking about it, and that's hugely valuable. And on the other hand, there's this side of saying, there's something about sort of growing up in a background and living with it that, and being with this identity that really is meaningful in terms of being represented. And one of the things that people like Judy are on the front lines of now is really trying to figure out where we come to that balance.
Right.
And I think it's but I think we can all find cases where we say, well, somebody should have been in the room that really understood and represented and came to that background that really...
Right, but it's also when a non-Jew is playing a Jew, and they're getting directed to act like a Jew, or they're getting some facial stuff done so they can look like that annoys me.
Yeah.
There's a Jewish actor out there who gets this character.
Right.
And doesn't need to have a fake nose or, I don't know.
I think that's hugely important, the idea that there are these people out there who are therefore being passed over because that's terrible. That's a shame.
I mean, there's never a white person playing a black person.
Right. That's true.
What? Oh, there used to be all the time, yeah. But now they don't do it. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. I'm just saying. But it doesn't happen. It would be like,
Yeah.
how dare you?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'm very...
I think something
Yeah,
interesting
I don't
about
know.
this, not that I was asked, but other
I'm gonna
ethnic-
ask you,
Thank you.
yeah.
Other ethnic groups are fighting for more representation, and it is kind of funny that Jews are sort of like, it's fine. Like there's sort of this like bashfulness or something being like, oh, we're fine. Look at us. We run Hollywood. We're fine. And so I
Right.
think that pushing back against that and saying, wait, why can't we sort of say what everyone else says?
Yeah.
I think like we're sort of seeing that more and more a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, you are. I mean, I'm reading maybe.
Jews don't count.
Yeah. I mean, I think you are seeing those questions asked in the papers a little bit more that you never, even 6 months ago, a year ago, you never would have asked. And I think that's a positive thing that those questions are being asked. Why isn't someone? I don't think Rachel Brosnahan would have not had these questions, or I think she would have had these questions if Maisel was starting right now in a way.
Right.
That wouldn't have been 5 years
Yeah,
ago.
that's true. 5 years ago, it was like, oh.
Right.
But it is shocking
Yeah,
to me.
I agree with that.
So there are actually a bunch of really, really good questions, so I'll try to go
Wow.
through them. I mean, an amazing crowd. Jeremy, what is the role of Yiddish and Yiddishisms in Jewish humor? P.S. You were a college intern at the National Yiddish Book Center in 1991 or 1992. I was there with my mom and daughter. I don't know if there's more, but that's for you.
It's nice to see you again. Yeah. No, I think that this gets back in some ways to what we're all talking about up here, which is this question of authenticity and artifice, right? And it's something where for a long time in the world that, for example, Mel Brooks came up with in the Borscht Belt, you would have, one of my favorite things about the word was that you would have these people, and they would be these comedians, and they would tell a joke, and they would be telling it to, a couple of generations of people, and they would tell the joke in English, but then the punchline they would give in Yiddish. And only the Yiddish speakers could understand it, and all of their children or their grandchildren were very annoyed. And there's that sense of what is Yiddish now? Is it something which is just funny, or is it a sign of a heritage, or is it and the history of Jewish comedy in America is in a lot of ways the history of Yiddish and authenticity in that kind of way. And Brooks is sort of wonderful at this, where he has in Blazing Saddles, again, he has the Native American speaking Yiddish, which is a fantastic joke. So,
And Yiddish is, I mean, the words, they're so fun, and they're so descriptive. Ungapachka. There's just so many great Yiddish
I think
words.
there's a reason that when Mad Magazine started, like they larded is the wrong word for this audience, but you know what I mean. They larded this with Yiddish because of just the sonic qualities, certainly for an American audience, of the Yiddish words. And that would be, by definition, what we're talking about is an audience for whom it's not the native language.
Right.
Right. So it is a story of the funniness of Yiddish being a story of American Jews coming to America and becoming sort of part of an English language.
Right. And so many non-Jews have adopted, like, I'm schwitzing,
Yeah,
or,
100%.
yeah.
100%.
And George Santos, apparently, also.
Okay, this is the spicy one. What and where does Woody Allen fit into the Jewish humor story? And then we get either Saul Bellow wrote this, or we have a quote from Saul Bellow: "Jews are between laughter and turmoil."
Oh, yes. My mother always said, if we weren't laughing, we'd be crying. Woody Allen, so Jewy.
Yeah.
Like, beyond Jewy.
Yeah.
The Nebuchadnezzar Jewy. I mean, there'd be no Larry David without Woody Allen.
I teach a class at Columbia on a history of Jewish comedy, which you're all invited to. And they sometimes the students ask, why are you including Woody Allen? Are you going to include Woody Allen? And I said to them, in the 1970s, in the mid-1970s, and this is true, there was a book that was published of people's dreams about Woody Allen. So many people were dreaming about Woody Allen that they wrote a book about him. Yeah, this is true.
Like, what kind of dreams?
Oh, all kinds. Dirty, but not only dirty.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm like, this man,
So unattractive.
yes,
Yeah.
I think that is true.
Yeah.
You know what? Gentile women love him. Blonde
Right.
women. Yeah, that's his type, right?
No.
In movies, at least.
Yeah, in movies, yeah.
in the movies. But it was someone with, as you're saying, Judy, I mean, with such seismic impact on Jewish humor, on American humor, on comedy, you can't not have him be part of the story. It's
Right.
And so that's the answer to me, anyway. That's my answer.
Yeah, you can't erase,
Yeah.
this erasing of people.
Yeah.
No.
No.
So I'm going to do a double header. I'm just smushing two questions together. One, what would you say are the hallmarks of Jewish humor? And how has Jewish humor shaped or been shaped by the humor of other ethnic or minority groups in the United States?
Wow. Don't you think Jewish humor has preceded those other? I mean,
We're pretty old as a
yeah,
people.
we're yeah.
As it goes.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I'd put that as a personal question. Like, do you find when you look at other, I mean, you work with comedians who are not Jewish all the time, as well
Right.
as comedians. Like, do you find things that you say, oh, that's really resonant to me, or that's not really resonant to me, or I don't get it all?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I usually know where the joke is. I don't
Right.
laugh at the joke all the time, but I always know where the joke is. But there's something, that it, the cadence, the question at the, and I should like that sort of stuff that is just the way we talk.
Yeah.
That comes out even if you're just trying to tell a joke.
Yeah.
There's inherently Jewish things in telling jokes, and that there's that da 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 da, and that's very. I mean, look at when you read out of the Torah; it's all written there how you're supposed to say it, and
Yeah, I think that's right.
yeah.
There was a survey, I think it was in the 80s, the early 80s maybe, of like 100 TV writers, of which probably 97 of them were Jewish
Right.
at that point. And they said, how do you write Jewish? And they came to exactly that was the answer that they came to, was that sort of switch in, like,
Yeah.
this you call living, right?
Right.
That was
Right.
for them, the sign, right? It's the construction of the sentence.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
So Judy, two questions for you, though Jeremy, you're welcome to answer them. What is your best Jewish joke that always gets laughs? I'm not sure what the definition of Jewish joke is there, but you can decide. And then, is there a third rail topic you wouldn't touch?
Like a Jewish joke I wrote.
Yeah.
What's my favorite Jewish joke I wrote? I mean, it's probably my joke about visiting the Anne Frank house. See? That's it. I did a joke. I love this joke, but how I went to the Anne Frank house and I got very emotional. And they lived in this tiny space for 2.5 years, couldn't make any noise all day for fear of being caught by the Nazis, which would have been the demise of my entire family, because there's no way my mother would have kept her mouth shut for the entire afternoon. Judith, I asked you to wash that dish 10 minutes ago. They're here. They're coming. They're not going to get it. That's right, they're coming. And we're all going to die because you couldn't wash a goddamn dish. So, I mean, the joke is about my mother, but... it's true. She would be like, now we're all dead because you. But I talk a lot now about anti-Semitism in my act, and I talk about Israel in my act, which is also, that is when you think about what you're not going to talk about. And I feel like I have to talk about Israel because, first of all, Israel's not perfect, but it's a democracy. And there's so much misinformation. And so I started to talk about it, and it's so interesting, the response I get from the audience. I talked about how I went there, I'm going again in a couple weeks, but I just feel like I have a microphone. Like, there's so many comedians, they're like, why do you have to talk about, why do you have to be political, why do you have to bring up this or that? And I feel like, there's so many comedians who are just silly. and they can just write funny, silly material. And good for them that they don't think about this 24 hours a day. You know, but if you've never had to fight for, you know, your rights, you've never had anyone stand in front of the Supreme Court so that you can live with dignity, or if you've never experienced, then you're lucky. You're a lucky person. And there are comedians who have had nice lives. And so, okay, time to wake up. But that's my alarm on the road when I have to get up for my gig. It's so annoying that I had such a PTSD thing. But my line is where I won't cross. If I do a joke and I think they're laughing for the wrong reason, that's when.
Oh, that's interesting.
That is when I am like, no, I'm not going.
You won't
there
take
with
any
it.
kind of laugh. It's a particular right.
Like, and you know, people are like, how do you know? You know when they're laughing for the wrong reason.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and that's it. I will call them out. I'll say, that's not what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a fine line.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's so, I don't know. It's just really hard now. It's so hard. Because everyone has an opinion and they can.
Well, speaking of opinions, our last question for both of you, who are some of your favorite comedians today?
Oh, today.
Or, I mean, it doesn't say I said today.
Oh, all
It could be
right.
ever.
Who do you like, Jeremy?
Mel Brooks is okay.
Yeah.
I think you know, he's not bad. Look, you know, you may have met my wife Miri, who introduced us before. So we have small children, so we only get out in front of a couple of hundred people. But you know, so we haven't seen sort of a lot of live stuff. So it's been
How old are your kids?
10, 8, and 5.
Ugh, you had 3? What
Yeah,
is
wait.
wrong with you?
We like that.
All right.
We like kids. I don't know what to tell you.
Okay.
But you have a college kid, so you.
I have 21 and 26.
Yeah, so you can get out. You can go out.
Yeah, I can go out now.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like it. That's the problem. It's like you can, but it's like, you know.
But aside from you, who are your favorites? Who are you?
There
you
are
get to see
so many
everybody.
really funny comedians. There were so many I loved growing up, as I mentioned, you know, Toady and Joan, and I loved Mom's Mabley too because she was fearless.
Yeah.
And I love Phyllis, although I did interview Phyllis. She never talked to the audience, but I thought Phyllis was, you know, amazing. But then there are so many comics now who are really funny.
Yeah.
And then there's very new comics who are funny on social media and then go into a club and don't know what the hell they're doing, and it's not good for the art of stand-up. You know, so club bookers will now book someone with, you know, 1 million followers or a viral video who cannot do an hour show.
Oh.
And I think it hurts the art of stand-up. So who are funny comedians today? Who do I love? I love my friend Jessica Kirson. There's the people I started with, like Jon Stewart, but
Who blurbed your book? He's right up there.
Yeah, see, they respect me. Let's see. I used to love Susie Essman and Joy Behar.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There's so many great comics out there today, and then there's so many crappy ones. And also, you watch the Netflix specials,
Yeah.
and there's nothing special about them.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. They just sort of it's content.
Right. It's content for them, and it's like they're young. I'm 60. I haven't had a special in 10 years.
Oh.
Yeah, so there's not a lot of women. It's funny that there's men can go to any age, but the women, when do you see women I think Wanda's hilarious.
Yeah.
Huh?
Wanda Sykes.
Yeah, Wanda Sykes. Oh, I'm sorry. But yeah, I don't know who I think is fun. You probably don't know any of them. You know, I see them in the clubs, but you have to really go to a club to see what a comedian does. I don't think
Yeah.
it translates Not all comedy translates on television.
And it has to be at length, like you're saying, at the club,
Right.
right? It's not just 2 minutes or 30 seconds
Right,
or something like
right.
that. Yeah. Well, that makes sense.
All right. On that note,
Thank
you
you.
all for being
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
Judy.
you all.
Thank you, Jeremy. Books over there. Sign them over there. Thank you all. And thanks to the Jewish Museum and the Jewish Book
10,
Council.
8,
And we'll see you back
5.
next year for another season of Unpacking the
Are you
Book.
so Is there a babysitter there?
Right now, your sister.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, you go sign.